How's it going, guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Theme Park Shark Podcast. My name is Dustin, and today we are back with Shark Stop with Alicia, Stella. Alicia, always great to have you here.
Always a pleasure.
And today, guys, there is a ton going on in the theme park realm. This last week, Alicia, was like one of the biggest weeks we've had so far. Wouldn't you say over the entirety of this pandemic, as far as news and changes, or do you think there's been other weeks that have been pretty big, or is this pretty much the standout week for you thus far?
I mean, the last 2 weeks, maybe, last couple weeks, there's been a lot going down, a lot of information, a lot of changes, and it's every time I go to look on Twitter, I have to brace myself for what might be coming next.
Which is funny because you always do have to brace yourself for what's coming next, because it seems like the information is always evolving. You and I spoke about this off show, that it does seem to always kind of change day to day. So there's a lot of evolving information. I think that's a really good way to put it. And I want to throw it to you so you can kind of dive into some of the things that we can immediately start addressing that's happened over the last 2 weeks.
Well, okay. The biggest things that we're all talking about right now is last week, Comcast had another earnings call. And the big headline was there was a 94% decrease in earnings from the parks division, which was during a quarter when the parks were closed for most of the time. So that's to be expected. But regardless, that was on a Thursday. Come Friday morning, and a lot went down in a short period of time. And I was getting a lot of conflicting reports, and I was trying to make sense of it. But at the end of the day, what we learned was there was a lot of layoffs at Universal Orlando. Comcast apparently went in and it just demanded, I guess is the word I'm going to use, that cuts be made, money be saved, that they're trying to stop the bleeding because, keeping the capacity on the parks down, the tourism industry is not doing that great. They're looking at a forecast of 4 or 5 years until the tourism industry recovers, and they're trying to recoup some of the losses or at least mitigate the damages in the meantime. Unfortunately, and the saddest part is that I heard the number 500 thrown around for team members that were fired. And that's a lot. And
right.
I've had people reach out to me that were, it just came out of nowhere. This is the second round of big layoffs like this that Universal's made. And at the same time, given the situation, it's, I don't want to say understandable, but it's understandable, but it's also awful because these are people's jobs. But that wasn't the only thing. They needed cuts. I'll just cut to the chase, but the biggest thing is that Epic Universe went from being paused to being postponed indefinitely. This is not just what they said last time, April 30th with the last earnings call. We're putting a pause on construction for Epic Universe. This is like we're packing up the offices, we're sending everyone home, and hopefully we'll revisit this at a later date.
That was a bow to my heart, Alicia. I was so in love with this park, and literally every single day that I looked at the concept art, I just wanted this park to happen. So the fact that we're here, I think this was a worst case scenario fear for everyone. Like I mentioned in the last episode, we all kind of have this immediate reaction when we hear about projects becoming paused, like, oh no, this is going to be like a project of the past that gets paused, but it's not really paused, it's actually canceled. So I think we all kind of had that fear, but hopefully for this one, it is just a delay. But I think at the end of the day, we can pretty much all kind of see at this point, if we do get Epic Universe, it's probably not going to come in the iteration that we were expecting to this point.
Yeah, no, that's what people are saying, that, we don't, it's a year, when we're recording this, it's a year and a day since they've officially announced Epic Universe.
Yeah.
That was August 1st of 2019 when they showed us that concept art. And lately, when I've been talking about it, I've been saying, now with this pause, take a long look at that concept art because it might be different by the time it opens. But this is, I try to remain optimistic, but this is definitely, they were still doing construction at Epic, at the site, and they might still do some back of house stuff, and they might do because they were doing stuff that's going to support the current resort as well as the new resort down there. So that might continue, but everything else is definitely stopped. They actually put out a statement later in the day. On Friday, they said, we have made the difficult decision to reduce our workforce to reflect current priorities and needs. Universal spokesman Tom Schroeder Schroeder also said that we are prioritizing daily operations and shorter term projects and continuing our pause on longer term projects such as Epic Universe as we follow the tourism industry to recover, or as we allow the tourism industry to recover. What I've heard, 4 to 5 years is how long they think their analysts are saying it's going to take to get things back to normal. I mean, we're talking about a multi-billion-dollar project. So if there ever was a way to save money during this time, it's to stop all construction on that project, all development on that project. But there were other short-term ways of saving money. They officially announced that they're temporarily, I'm using air quotes, temporarily closing 6 attractions at the Universal Orlando Resort. They're closing A Day in the Park with Barney, Fear Factor Live, which was already closed, Poseidon's Fury, Stormforce Accelatron, Kang and Kodo's Twirl and Hurl, and Fast and Furious Supercharged. Which, that's the odd man out, because you have a couple shows that aren't getting that big of a, like Day in the Park with Barney may begin 15, 20 people a show. That's, that makes sense, I guess. That whole area is closed because the play areas are closed, because anything hands-on is closed. So, okay. Fear Factor Live was already closed for Halloween Horror Nights, but then that got canceled. So now Fear Factor Live just isn't going to reopen. And then Poseidon's Fury, it's another one with actors. Storm Force and Twirl and Hurl are flat rides. And Fast and Furious Supercharged, though, it's like their second newest attraction at the resort.
Yeah, it's crazy.
That's
that's insane.
That's an odd one. But all of the team members that were working on these are supposedly being moved to other positions. So
That's good.
They're saving on operating costs for the attractions, but also it seems like they're kind of utilizing the small workforce that they're already, like the full-timers that they have. And instead of bringing in more part-timers to fill spots, that may have been part of the layoffs. So no one lost their job that worked at these attractions so that they could move on and fill other gaps. And that wasn't a week ago. Before they cut hours again at the parks. Universal Studios Florida closing at 5 p.m. most nights now in the summer months. So that ought to give you an indication of just how bad it is. With reduced capacity, they're still not even meeting those numbers.
I think when you look at this list of closed attractions, it is a kind of strange list of attractions, but you have to think at the end of the day, it's probably just a numbers game, and they look at, I guess, the average amount of people actually utilizing these attractions, and that's how they make the decision. That's what I'm assuming. But at this point, I think a lot of people look at this list, and I've seen this just kind of circulating around the community. A lot of people begin to wonder how many of these attractions won't come back at all. How many attractions is this the moment where they start to, change and phase into something else? Now, I know we are in this situation where the company's trying to save money. Maybe they're not trying to do a lot of changes at the park right now. But do you foresee any chance at all that any of these attractions currently listed could be, this is just their moment out?
I think 2 on this list might not come back. And yes, it's the 2 you're thinking of. Not Fast and Furious Supercharged, no matter how many people might think that should be the one to go. That is still one of the newer attractions. They did say they want to focus more on their signature attractions, and some of these smaller experiences, things like the flat rides. That's an easy one to close. It's not, that's an easy one to start right back up again. Things like Poseidon's Fury, where you have an actor involved, is a little bit different. You have to go back through the process of getting the actor back on. Same thing with Barney and Fear Factor. I believe they let go the staff for the Fear Factor show before Halloween Horror Nights was getting prepared. So some people believe that was already the end of that attraction. But the Walt Disney World, also the Disney company, is having their earnings call is on Tuesday this week, coming up when we're recording this.
Oh boy.
And many are fearing more layoffs, more mass layoffs from Disney World itself. Disneyland, Universal Studios Hollywood haven't even had the chance to open back up.
Right.
So there's this rumor going around. I think it started on WDW Magic forums, but there's a rumor going around that the theme parks here in Orlando are actually going to start experimenting with closing like 2 weekdays a week. I haven't heard this from any other sources. I've just seen it floating around, and I think I pinpointed where it started. But then again, it might just be everyone guessing, because that just seems like the next step. You cut the hours down as low as you can. You cut down attractions. What's left there to cut, except don't open every single day. SeaWorld parks, even when they came back online, didn't open for a couple days, especially the water parks. They would have a floating 2 days off every week. So, it's entirely possible. I don't know. It's going to be a big headache for Disney with the reservation system that they're using. Anyone who has reserved days on a day that will suddenly be closed would have to be rescheduled, or they'd have to do it after a certain amount of, I don't know. I just don't know how it would work. Even with the train at Universal Orlando being able to cross between the two parks, if you were to close Islands of Adventure on Tuesday and leave Universal Studios Florida open, but people paid for a 2-park pass, do you refund them the 40 something extra dollars for that day? I just don't understand how that could work. So I don't know the validity of that rumor, but that just goes to show how we're still expecting more, like the other shoe to drop on things like this.
There's a ton of just little intricate details that go on as far as operations right now that I think a lot of us just have to kind of guess at, because this isn't a moment that we've ever seen before, or something that we can kind of look back on a moment and be like, oh yeah, it's kind of like this. I mean, we're literally experiencing something right now that nobody has ever experienced. So just thinking about the parks reopening, I remember all of us thinking like, how will the procedures take place? How will they keep people safe in line? How will they do this? How will they do that? So I think a lot of the questions that you're bringing up right now, like the park-to-park tickets and things like that, are just, they're just a part of these ongoing battle of opening a theme park during this time and figuring out the operational guidelines that they are going to follow at this time. There's just a lot that has to be figured out, and I think they're finding out that as the days go by and as this situation is not totally getting better, there's more operational guidelines to figure out. I want to go back to Universal Studios Florida, and I want to talk about Horror Nights with you.
Yes.
Do you know at what point that was kind of made official? Was that almost like right up until the announcement, or do you think it was kind of farther back that decision was made? How long did Universal hold that one closed? Do you know?
That's one of those situations where it was going to happen here in Orlando until it wasn't, and I think that there were certain things chipping away at the possibility in the weeks leading up to what was supposed to be the announcement that Thursday. Like further details when the special buy one get one sale had ended. That next day when they start selling the regular tickets didn't go up for sale, and that was our first indication that maybe something here is wrong. But just a few days earlier in that week, like on Monday, people were getting their responses back that they were hired. So we know Monday the event was technically still on, at least in an operational way. They were still building the houses, which, by the way, sound amazing from what I've heard. The actual houses themselves, like especially the Beetlejuice house. Yes, there was going to be a Beetlejuice house, and yes, it was going to be based on the original movie, and it was going to be perfect. But these people were being hired. They're going to be a scare actor.
You're not making a lot of people happy right now, Alicia.
I hope it's around. I hope they keep it for next year.
Yes.
But there was rumors that one or two of the IP holders didn't want their names mentioned in any marketing materials because they didn't want to be attributed to opening like a special event like this during a pandemic. I think they didn't want the bad press. So I don't know if they were actually asking to pull out or to not open those houses, but they definitely didn't want their name mentioned in any of the commercials or marketing materials. So that's like if, Netflix, just for example, I don't know if it was them, but like Hill House, I think the Netflix show was going to be one of the houses. And if they couldn't promote that because Netflix didn't want their name on the event, like that's Universal has to pause and think, wait a minute, if you don't want your name on the event, why do we want our name on the event? I think they were testing virtual line. When the parks reopened, they had a virtual line on many of the attractions for the first week to try to test the system. And the system itself just couldn't handle the load. And that was supposedly the way that they were going to do the houses. They were going to have queues, the physical queues only to so like you can only have so much physically distanced queues. So they were going to do a virtual line system where come back when this queue is full. But if you had a virtual line for all 8 or 10 houses and the system couldn't handle it, then that's another reason that maybe the test didn't work out. And I think the final nail in the coffin for Halloween Horror Nights, pardon the phrasing, was Theme Park University reported that they were doing a safety walkthrough with Orange County officials, and Orange County officials, like with the reopening crew, were asking, could you widen these pathways in the houses for safety reasons? And they just can't. These are houses that have been being built since the year started, and you can't just like take it and reconfigure the maze. So I think that like literally 2 days before it was supposed to, I mean, they were building the tribute house, was the tribute store was supposed to open on Friday, and it didn't because they had to make changes or scrub all the 2020s off of everything because they were that ready to open that week. And it was just like 2 days before they didn't get approval, and they just knew it wouldn't be worth the money to pump into this to try to get it open and change it, or just wouldn't have the time. So like, that's my understanding, or that's a lot of the rumors that I've heard from different sources, that it was a lot of different problems. And at the same time, they'd have to do like the event every night to even have the capacity necessary to fill the need. If you want frequent flyer and you want to be able to keep coming, but there's only a 10% capacity, I just can't imagine this event existing the way that it normally would. And, you know, for the safety of everyone involved, you know, maybe it's for the best that it doesn't happen this year and we do it up next year if things are in a safer system, you know?
I think that's kind of the hope, is that they don't, you know, that they put whatever was missed this year into next year, and that it's not cut back next year as well because of the situation, which I think is a real concern for a lot of people at this point. Just seeing the trend at this point is, how many cuts are we going to see, and for how long are we going to see cuts? I think a lot of people are going to want a really impressive Horror Nights next year. So hopefully Universal delivers. We'll see what happens. Circling back to the few attractions that are closed right now, you said to them that there's potentially 2, and that it's the 2 that they're thinking of. In case they weren't thinking of them, do you want to drop the 2, or do you not want to say it at this point?
Well, Fear Factor Live, I think Rick's Flicks, I don't know if you've ever seen him. I think he was one of the first to say, or maybe the first to say, that he doesn't think Fear Factor Live would be coming back.
I think he was. Yeah.
I tend to agree with him. I think that he was right on about that. We've guessed it before though, and it's come back. So you don't count it down.
Yeah,
you never know.
Right. it's its own kid zone in a way.
Yeah, it's got its own curse.
Yes.
You know, bring back the wild west done show,
yeah,
please.
Why not?
But the other one, we'll get to the other one in a minute. Let's circle back to Epic Universe, because this is the developing story, and this is what I spent most of Friday. It's a bad day to be away from the computer, but I was away from the computer most of the day doing some other work. So I kept checking my phone, and I spoke to a lot of different people. And at first, it was like a lot of, I think it was coming from a place of fear, because the layoffs were happening, and everyone, and I wasn't sure. It was like, is this like because people are being fired that we're working on Epic Universe? Is that why? But no, it really sounds like they're packing up everything, and they're just ready to not think about Epic Universe for a little while. They don't want to say the word canceled, so I'll say postponed indefinitely, but they seem to think 4 to 5 years for the industry to recover. That may be like 3 or 4 years for it to recover, and then 1 to 2 years for them to recoup the losses. You know, that might not be necessarily. Like, if we get a vaccine, if the world goes back to normal in an incredibly fast rate that not everyone would predict, and people want to go back, we still have to deal with the unemployment and people not having money and people not having savings and people not being able to afford to travel. So even if, like, by some miracle, half of tourism comes back in 2 years, it's still going to take 5 years probably before we're back to where we were, or some semblance of normalcy. And I think that's what they saw. And Comcast is like, listen, we need to just shut it down and we'll pick it back up. But that would put a possible opening for Epic Universe at like 2030.
Oh boy, that's a long time.
And that is a long time.
That's a long time.
And as people pointed out, that it's so long that the park itself would probably be redeveloped from scratch, like keeping the layout maybe to some extent because of the way that the land was already graded and set up and the pipes put in, and the plans, like, to save on money, we've already got the plans for what the hub is shaped like, but at the same time they could rethink a lot for the park in that time. And I don't say, like, I'm not saying they're going to be working on it for the next 5 years or whatever. They're done. They're stopped, and a lot can change in that time. The way we visit theme parks might change in the future. The technology that you would use in rides might be different in the future.
That was exactly where my head went first. Is how is an attraction? I mean, the Epic Universe attractions, right? Let's say they were primarily developed in 2019 and even 2018 a little bit. How is an attraction developed in that time span going to fare in 2030? Right. I think it's a lot different.
My heart goes out to all those who worked the last, we're going on 5 years of development for this park, to see it all be mothballed, put into the archives, and, maybe some ideas used, some ideas not used. But a lot can change and a lot will be different, and they will probably be, redeveloping the whole thing. The only thing that might remain is the name. We might see Epic Universe open, and that's the one thing that's familiar to us.
I saw you joke around on Twitter that someone said Epic Universe would get a new name, and you put Fantastic Worlds. I thought that was funny.
I'm all for it.
Yeah.
I'm all for it. Everything old is new.
Yes.
There's one problem, though, with the concept of this 2030 prediction, and that is that I think they have an agreement with Nintendo to get these Nintendo lands open. Japan is already ready to open whenever the world is ready for Nintendo to open. Hollywood is busy building theirs. Orlando is supposed to get it. And I think, from what I'm hearing, and they could always rework the deal, but from what I'm hearing is that they have some kind of deal with Nintendo, and it's possible that we might actually see Super Nintendo World moved back to one of the original Universal Orlando parks.
Oh my gosh.
And taken out of Epic Universe so that it can open sooner.
Well, if that happens, you would have to assume that we're going to see some progress quick. I mean, because there wouldn't really be a point of doing that unless they're thinking that they can get this done relatively quick, where we're going to see some sort of movement then in the next 6 months, wouldn't you say?
Here's the thing. I don't want to make predictions in this day and age. Everything we knew Thursday changed Friday, and everything we know today could change tomorrow.
Yeah, you're right. Vaccine tomorrow, everyone's good by a week from now. And
or Godzilla invades and there's no stopping the aliens from landing. There's no
I didn't want to go that route.
2020, there's no telling what could happen next. Especially in the theme park industry. And I'm sure that Universal, after the Jurassic Coaster, after the Super Nintendo World in Hollywood, I'm sure they don't want to be building anything else. They got Beijing going on and opening next year and on schedule and on budget, surprisingly. But they probably don't want to invest anything else, not another dime. I heard that they're actually losing money on some of the projects. Like they have to pay off probably the roller coasters for Epic Universe, even though they're not going to use them. Like they have construction fees that they're going to have to pay, because they signed contracts. And it's cheaper to pay off the hundreds of millions than to pay the $5 billion.
The hundreds of millions with no return on that too. Like that's
right.
That's
exactly.
Even more insane.
That's just throwing away the hundreds of millions rather than spend and invest the $6 billion that supposedly this project was going to cost.
Wow.
At the same time, they may not want to build anything, but they may be somewhat obligated to build Super Nintendo World. But also they might feel like this might be the last thing they need, and then they're good for a while on the parks in Orlando. Of course, everyone would say, the Kid Zone was where Super Nintendo World was supposed to go. The Super Nintendo World plans for Epic Universe were a clone of the Kid Zone plans. The design work and the even the permits that were originally filed, they're already all taken and done, and the math has been done on how to fit this into this area. So at least that's saving them some of the lead up time into getting it started. And where would it go? Yeah, where Barney is. So if A Day in the Park with Barney closes in a few days temporarily, and this is where they might be moving Super Nintendo World, there's a chance this might be your last week to do the Barney show. So
the question then becomes, at this point, that plot has the room for DK too? Because I think that's where everyone's head goes. That's the question I always see: is do we get DK there? And the answer is yes. No.
The answer is there's room for it.
Yeah, that's what I mean. There's room for it eventually.
The answer is
happen.
probably not at first.
Right.
If I was
it's like Japan's
Universal,
iteration at first, right?
Exactly. I would do a phase 1. I would open the Mario Kart and the Yoshi and the Mushroom Kingdom area, and I would save Donkey Kong, which would have to tear down that one parade building they used for Halloween Horror Nights. Yeah. So I'd put that as a phase 2. I hesitate to say phase 2 would be anytime soon, is what I was going to say. I think that you might be obligated to put Super Nintendo World there, but not obligated to put the whole thing. Just like Hollywood's getting a smaller version, I'm sure we could get a smaller version here, and then they could add to it later and still, be well within their obligations. On timing, who knows? Like they could. I've heard one rumor that was floating around the forums from someone I know that says they want to slow down the Hollywood construction for Super Nintendo World to actually and speed it up here in Orlando to open the both at the same time and have like this big campaign across like, television spots and everything. Now, now that the parks are safe again, come visit Super Nintendo World on both coasts, 2-3 years from now. And that's possible, but Super Nintendo World at Hollywood has been speeding up, actually. Construction's been going really fast lately. So, like, I feel like I would have to slow down quite a bit for all of Kid Zone to be demolished. And then, for us to catch up to where you guys are over there. But also, the Animal Actor stage is still open. So, I'm going to call that the canary in the coal mine. And if we see the Animal Actor stage close, Animal Actor stage might close because they're closing a lot of entertainment to try to save money. And that is a natural response. The same thing happened, the recession in 2008. Same thing happened after 9/11 and tourism dive. So, things are up in the air, but this seems to be a pretty solid rumor that we might not see Epic Universe for a long time. We might not ever see it, but we probably will see Super Nintendo World at Universal Orlando.
Just so people kind of understand where we're at this point, do you have percentages on these things, like the 2030 EU, Super Nintendo World at Universal? Like, what's the percentages you're putting these at this point?
Just let's imagine there was meetings going on. And there was a lot of fear going on Friday morning of like bargaining. We're at the bargaining stage here where they're like, okay, we can give up this for a while, kick the can down the road on that, but can we at least do this? And I think there might be a lot of that going on right now where it's like, okay, we'll close these so that we can keep the park open and not close 2 days a week. Okay, we can put the $6 billion theme park off until the world is in a better place, but let's still do Super Nintendo World so we have tourism when the tourism is ready to come back, because tourism's ready to come back 4 or 5 years. Then we still have another 4 or 5 years of developing a new theme park. That's a gap in between, and they don't want that gap. So I could see Super Nintendo World as kind of like our consolation prize. I hate to say it like that.
Hey, if Florida gets Super Nintendo World there, I've talked to you about this too. All that means to me is that Epic Universe gets a different. That was supposed to be the anchor, right? Like that was supposed to be the thing that people thought about when they think about Epic Universe and what takes them there. So now we get a new anchor, and we didn't lose Nintendo because you can potentially get it in its full form at Universal Studios Florida. So it might be a loss in terms of time, but at the end of the day, it might not be a huge loss if we get another really cool anchor at Epic Universe, and we still had Nintendo here at the.
I think I'm trying to remain optimistic. I'm excited for the prospect of being able to ride the Mario Kart ride sooner than, like, technically could possibly be open sooner than what we were expecting for Epic Universe, since we were expecting 2024 now. So technically, but maybe probably around the same time, to be honest. Like, there are rumors like we could speed up and we can open at the same time as Hollywood, but at the same time, like, I feel like we're one more quarterly report away from more cuts and more changes and more slowdowns. And if they don't announce Super Nintendo World for Universal Orlando by the end of this year, which is a possibility, but if they don't do it by the end of this year, there's also a very good possibility that has been postponed as well.
I'll throw another curveball at you, and going back to the everything old is new, and also moderately pulling, I guess, from Epic Universe. There's a lot of things currently aligning, at least in my mind, with Fear Factor closing. Is this...
Oh, I know where this is going.
Is this the Ministry moment, or is this not so much?
That's a question. Okay. I was going to say it's a good question, but I'll just say that's a question that I'm seeing popping up a lot. Let's pretend for a moment that if the rumor is true that Super Nintendo World is being built, not because they want to do something to have something at the parks while they wait for Epic Universe, but because it's literally a contractual obligation to have it built by 2025 somewhere in Orlando. If that's the case, they're only doing it because they legally have to. They don't legally have to build a Ministry of Magic attraction, probably. Probably? I don't know, actually. I don't know what the deal is with Warner Brothers, but at the same time, if Epic Universe is postponed even further into the future, let's postpone it indefinitely. Then I could see something like the Ministry taking over Fear Factor Live, which was originally what Universal Creative was hoping to do. They didn't necessarily want to bring that to the other park until the other park existed. Like once that was a possibility, then it became, okay, let's move it over here because we're not going to be building something new here. But yeah, so I wouldn't see something like that start or happen for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. But if it was to happen, it's happening probably because Epic Universe isn't. Like, that's what I'm going to say.
See, I was more so thinking at some point when they moderately recoup and things are looking okay, and like you were mentioning, if they have a pretty big gap now because they haven't even started on the progress of Epic Universe, they can't just let the current parks kind of sit without any new offerings. I know they were kind of talking that they could potentially have Nintendo, but what else? What else could they potentially do if they even want to do it? They might sit on their, what they have and wait. But I don't know. I think, like I said, it's
one of those situations where after 9/11, they did sit around and they didn't build it. We've gotten so used to this new attraction at every park every year.
It's a different time, Alicia. I tell myself that's different people. Like, I don't know
every year we get a new attraction. We've gotten so used to it for the last decade that now the idea of thinking, every 4 to 5 years we get a new attraction is almost blasphemous. But that was the world we used to live in, and it's probably the world we're going to live in for a decade or more now. Especially with things like Walt Disney World, where they went gung-ho on so many attractions at the same time, almost spreading themselves thin to try to, they want to celebrate for the 50th anniversary. They want to catch up on Potter, and they want to they invested so much in things like Galaxy's Edge and Pandora and even New Fantasyland, going all the way back to the Potter days. And then going forward now, they've got several roller coasters opening and clones of different rides and Avengers Campus and multiple parks around the world. And the only way to recoup after all that is to stop.
So there is a lot happening, guys. There is a lot to potentially think down upon, but I think also at the same time there's a lot to be grateful for as well. I mean, there's a lot happening in our world. If you have your health and you have your safety right now, that's a lot more important than what's going on in the theme park industry, of course. But I will say this: there were some moderate moments even in the theme park industry, like we kind of mentioned throughout this episode. If we get Nintendo at Universal Studios Florida, I don't really see that as a negative, especially if it happens relatively soon. But after that, there is a little gap. But I just think if you look at the big picture, there are some positives to take away. And that's kind of how I'm trying to approach it. I don't know about you, Alicia, but I'm trying to look for some positives.
If you haven't been to the parks in a while, we have Rise of the Resistance, the Hagrid coaster, Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. We're about to have a Jurassic coaster. We're about to have the Tron coaster, Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind, Ratatouille. Like, there is so much good rides coming, even at the other parks. We have Iron Gwazi, and we have the Icebreaker, and then over in Hollywood we have Secret Life of Pets, the Jurassic World revamped redo, and Avengers, the Spider-Man ride. Like, we've so many different things that are about to open when things do, and I hate using the phrase, get back to normal. I'm using air quotes, but when they do and you're ready to go back to the parks, we have so much waiting for us. That
the residuals of the golden age.
I think we can enjoy all of this amazingness, like in the theme parks, for 3 or 4 years while they get back their footing, get back to strong, and then we can see things, start to come back again. But until then, let's enjoy the fruits of the Renaissance, the theme park Renaissance. Enjoy it as soon as we can, when it's safe.
That's right, guys. I think that's going to wrap up today's episode. If you guys want to catch more of Alicia Stella, she is the Theme Park Stop on YouTube. She has the Park Stop podcast as well. And she is Alicia Stella on Twitter. If you guys are looking for more from the Theme Park Shark, you can find our podcast on Apple and Spotify. We are at themeparkshark.com, and of course, the Theme Park Shark on YouTube. But all right, guys, that's going to wrap up today's episode of Shark Stop. As always, I appreciate you guys being here and for listening and or watching. Take care, have a great day, and we'll see you guys in the next one.